another episode of the Everyday Defender podcast. Back once again with my friend Koos. How are you, Koos? Good to see you.
Hey Chris, how you doing? Nice to be back again.
Yes, I do enjoy these sessions of ours every month. Always look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with. And man, I think today we have another cracker topic or topics for our listeners. So yeah, really excited, and also really excited because the days are ticking by, which means that it won't be long now before we actually catch up in person again and get to see each
Yeah,
other in New York City. So that's going to be fun, and we'll talk a little bit about Experts Live US and things to look out for about that towards the end of the show. So really looking forward to that. It's going to be a good one.
3 weeks from now. Yeah, one we're recording this actually. So when people
Yeah,
are listening, it's only 1 week ago. One week from that time. Yeah,
yeah. So coming up soon. In today's episode, we have some great topics. To block or not to block is the question from my side. I'm kind of going to look into geo blocking and how that all works with Entra Conditional Access. I have a lot of customers and conversations with customers about geo blocking and whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, or does it even help, right?
yeah.
So I'll dig into some of my thoughts around that, and then Coast, really excited to talk about sort of the human in the loop, right? The human factor in cybersecurity. Tell us what you've got planned for us.
Yeah, for this time I didn't brought a very deeply technical topic, and we're not digging into very specific defender settings or anything this time. I wanted to explore the human factor in cybersecurity, and it is often blamed. People sometimes casually say it is the weakest link in security, the people behind the keyboards, and I think that's a little bit unfair. And I think we should empower people to actually become arguably the most strongest line of defense, actually. So I have a couple of thoughts I want to share, and some real world things that triggered me to talk about this topic today.
Yeah, very cool. Look, you say not technical, but I did spot some KQL in the show notes
Of
there. So,
course, I
so,
can't help myself, Chris. I can't
so,
help
they have
myself.
so there's
Th-
going to be some technical bits
This
there.
is
But
my
look,
natural thinking. When you would look into my head, it's only KQL going on there.
KQL,
So that's just
fair
me
enough.
spitting out some brain farts. Yeah,
No, that's great. Look, I honestly, I think it's such an important conversation, right? And I think there are really two very interesting sides to that topic when it comes to the industry. And when you speak to folks, there are a lot of different opinions on sort of what we do with our users and how we treat our users and
yeah,
all of that. So excited to get into that. But before we do, let's talk about geo blocking and
yeah.
geo blocking in conditional access. And so for folks who are not aware, I think everyone understands sort of the concept of conditional access in Microsoft Entra by now. We talk about it quite a lot, but what geo blocking does is it actually gives you that the ability to control access to your Entra integrated apps. So any of the M365 workloads or any app that you might have integrated with Entra, you can now block, or you can block access to those apps based on the location of the sign-in attempt. Um, it's a very interesting thing, and it really helps kind of reduce that risk, especially if you have regions where or you're seeing sign-ins from regions where you actually don't have an operation or presence, or maybe you don't actually do business in that region, right? So it's an interesting thing. The malicious activity. We all know about sort of script kiddies, and there are tools all over the internet that kind of do sort of these credential harvest attacks or credential replay attacks, right? Where they run some Python script, and it's basically just hammering away at things. So it's interesting. If you look in the security sign-in logs in Entra, in most tenants, almost any tenant, and this, I got a screenshot of the show notes here. This was just my own tenant. I just looked in it this morning, and I had a 30-day window, and I looked in and I just grabbed a couple of things, and you can see very clearly here that I've got sign-in attempts or failures from a whole raft of different places.
Yeah.
I've even left the IPs in there because I don't care about bad actors and their IPs. We can publish those. But you can see I've got a different sign-ins from all sorts of different places, and it's interesting that you will actually see a bunch of failures, and very often it'll be if you really spend time looking at it, you'll see a specific user account, and then you'll see a bunch of login attempts at that user account, and you'll see one or two from one region, and then it will bounce to another region and bounce to another region, bounce to another region. And very often that's because folks are using some sort of fire proxy or enter sprayer or some sort of tool that is reusing different IP addresses to make the connection attempts look to be coming from different places, right? Um, and so you're going to see these failures. Obviously, MFA is a really great line of defense here, because if they're not compromised, they got compromised user and credential pair, but there's MFA on it. You're still going to protect yourself. But my conversation with customers usually is, why would you allow folks to access your apps and your environment from regions that you're never going to need to
Yeah.
allow access to, right? So, for example, if you have a small Australian business and you operate here in the APAC or Asia Pacific region, maybe you have some staff in New Zealand and Australia. Well, why would you ever, or why would you need to allow folks to log in from India or Pakistan or any other country, right? Those types of conversations, right? I think it's
Yeah.
an interesting thing. And so generally what I am suggesting, and I've been doing this probably for the last 18 months or so now, I've been suggesting to customers that when we overall conditional access, we always look for certain conditional access rules that we want to see, right? MFA being there all the time. MFA for admin roles, a second policy always being there. Geo-blocking is one that I'm starting to sort of really want to see as well for customers now. And obviously for some companies, it's going to be a easier thing to implement than for others. If you only operate in the US, then it's much easier for you to implement something like this, rather than if you have a multinational organization and you have folks traveling all the time, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So bear that in mind when you think about this. But I think that this is a really good way to limit your exposure. And as always with these types of things, there's some considerations that you want to kind of have when you do this, right? And so the first part of this to think about is the accuracy. We all know those IP geolocation things were never designed to be 100% accurate, right? And so um, it's not going to be perfect. Understand that when you go into this. Obviously, if you are based in Australia and you implement, a policy that's going to block connections from the United States, you're going to get a pretty good hit rate on that, right? But if you are in the United States and you want to implement a policy that allows Washington State but blocks Oregon State, and they're on the border of each other, I'm
Yeah.
not sure how accurate that's always going to be, right? You're going to see weird things with even just mobile phone carriers
Yeah.
and roaming across state lines and stuff like that. You may, if you live close to the Oregon border, you may be connecting to a cell tower that's there, and it's going to be giving a different geo IP location than you would expect. Stuff like that. So accuracy isn't going to be, sort of super fine grained with this. So think about that. But that said, if you're getting a lot of uh, malicious attempts at your environment coming from Brazil and India, like, block those. Why would you need them? Unless, of course, you have folks that work out of Brazil and India, in which case that becomes, like I said, a little bit more difficult. Another thing to think about when you look at sort of geo IP blocking or geo blocking is legitimate travel reasons, right? Obviously, folks do travel. The world, I think, at the moment is smaller than ever. We were just talking about going to New York, right? So we'll be seeing
Yeah.
each other in New York in a month or so, and uh, of course, then when we're there, we're going to be wanting to connect to our own tenants and stuff like that. But if I've blocked connections from the United States to my tenant here in Australia, obviously that's going to be problematic. So if you're going to implement something like this, you have to also implement and think of a policy for folks that are going to travel, because your typical knowledge workers may not be traveling around and working. If you go on vacation to the Seychelles coast, maybe you're not going to be taking your device
Oh, I
and you
would
don't care
love to
about, like,
go
you're not.
on a vacation to the Seychelles.
But the thing is that sometimes the executives are traveling around all the time, and executives are always going to want to have their phones with them and
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. So you want to think about, what do we do with legitimate travel scenarios, and how do we um, cater to that? What's the process, right? Typically, Microsoft Form is a really good way to be able to do this. If you have PIM, stuff like that, these are really good ways to kind of automate a workflow scenario for this, so that you can kind of help cater to those legitimate travel scenarios. Break glass accounts, we talk about these all the time as well. You really want to exclude those from this. Now, again, break glass accounts typically you should not be traveling at all, right? They should only be coming in from
Yeah.
a very specific, well-known set of ranges. So tighten this down as best you can, but it's good to always have at least one of those things that are excluded and allowed to connect from everywhere,
Yeah.
just in case something goes wrong within the service. And maybe the conditional access engine can't make the right decisions at that time. You want something that has no policy applied to it, so you can get in. And another, sorry, Costa, did you have a
No,
question?
I
Oh,
wanted to add, but I was not sure if you're going to talk about this. But well, I'll hear from that in a second. What I also think it's a good idea to apply this to your app registrations, your enterprise apps, your service accounts, so to speak, because for your users, you might argue, especially smaller companies, you might not want to deal with all the figuring out who's traveling and who's not, and you might say, well, we already have MFA in place. Well, fine, but most of the applications just authenticate with a plain secret. A lot of companies use their secrets for 2 years or might never expire, and those might have some high privilege access as well. Maybe not many people are aware of the fact that you can implement this on applications as well.
yeah, look, there's a lot of scenarios where this can be really useful, right? And ultimately, it's conditional access, so you have such sort of fine grained level of how you can do this, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can have scenarios where you can, for example, say, if you're out of the country and coming from a known or registered device, then we'll allow
Yeah,
that. But if
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
not coming, so there are ways you can layer. Um, I think that for a lot of organizations, it makes sense to just have a very hard, like, a block. And I'll talk about how to come up with that list in a second. But the blocking can kind of make some sense. Um, Service traffic is something to think about. Now, again, I don't, and this kind of falls in line with some of the things I was talking about before, with like mobile phone providers, for example, where you're close to the border, stuff like that. I think sometimes we've definitely seen services that appear to originate from places that maybe we hadn't expected. You see this a lot in Exchange Online, actually, where you've got inbound mail flow probably coming from a region that you're like, why am I getting mail coming in from that region? And it may just be a
Yeah.
temporary routing issue within the service. Probably not that big of a deal, but something to think about. And again, it's something to look at as far as your logs go. And if you're going to be really clamping down on this, you want to pay attention and test things to make sure that you're not inadvertently breaking the service, right? I talked about this being conditional access, the amount of flexibility you have. I think really it makes sense to have even if it is just a high risk block list that says we want to block what we deem to be high risk countries. Um, High risk to you and your organization or your industry may be different to what high risk is for me. Um, we've had I've had some really good success with customers where we look at OFAC or sort of sanctioned countries. Right now, in the US, it's OFAC. I think it's the Office for Foreign Assets Control that kind of manages that sanctioned countries list. I'm pretty sure there's a UN sanctioned list as well, and there's an European Union sanctioned list, and probably other jurisdictions as well. So pick the one most appropriate to where you
Yeah.
are. You don't want to necessarily block every single thing, but take a look at those lists. Start with those lists as a start, right? One of the common things that we find in our region, if we take an OFAC list, for example, is many times Hong Kong will show up on that list as being a sanctioned country.
Mm.
Hong Kong is actually quite a a popular business partner in a lot of the Asia Pacific countries, right? So for us to go and I have customers here who a lot of them do business and travel frequently to Hong Kong. So it doesn't make sense for us to block connectivity from Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
Um, but again, for your organization, it may be different. Take a look at the list and sort of start there. There's also something called a sort of top 10 cybersecurity threats list. Um, and I've listed those countries in the show notes, and I think this is a really good place to start, right? So, of course, top of the list: Russia, China, Ukraine, Nigeria. Hey, all of those princes who want to give you money. Romania, North Korea, Brazil, India, Pakistan, and Vietnam. Now, my sort of experience with this, and I'm sure if you go take a look in your logs, you're probably going to find that at least 5 or 6 of those countries on that list um, showing you a significant amount of failed logins to your tenant, right? So I would say that that's always it's a really good place to start, because you're getting hammered from, script kiddies and sort of these I guess what do they call themselves, like access broker farms, right, that are trying to hammer your environment. So
Yeah.
block access from those countries. That's a really good place to start. Whittle it down as you need to make sure that you're doing the appropriate thing for your organization. So yeah, I think really important thing here to think about is, this is not a all inclusive, comprehensive security strategy, right? What this is it's a way to um, reduce your attack surface, keep the script kiddies away, as part of a layered security approach. So, anything you can do to make it more difficult and more expensive for bad actors to target your environment is going to mean that they're less likely to target your environment,
Yeah.
right? We've seen. I've been involved in sort of compromise assessments with customers before, where the actors themselves have been, in one of these countries, Pakistan, India, places like that, but they've been using VPS services or cloud infrastructure based in the United States to
Yeah.
target companies in the United States. There's not a lot you can do there, right? You're gonna be allowing access to connections from the US, more than likely, if you're in the US. And well, if someone's going to go actually pay to rent a VPS or some sort of cloud infrastructure so they can attack you, well, there's not a lot you can do there. And this isn't going to stop that, right? That's why we have layering. That's why we have
Yeah.
MFA and all these other things. But this will kind of really sort of help with those sort of drive-by, sort of opportunistic type of attacks. So it's definitely
Yeah.
something to think about.
And like you said, why is an employee logging in from Hong Kong from an unmanaged device, right? Why
Yeah,
is it not using a company phone or company laptop in that regard? So,
yeah.
again, I think the layering is very important.
Yeah, really, really important. So there are a bunch of ways that you can actually do this. If you want, you can obviously combine um, uh, these sort of country lists with policies that you may already have. Usually, the simplest approach is to firstly you go and create a named location in Entra. I usually call it risky countries. That's usually a really good one. Just whatever you want to call it, and then you create a new conditional access policy that basically applies to all resources and all users, and includes that risky countries list, and then you block access, right? So any connection that comes from all users to all your resources, and as you were saying before, Koos, about apps and stuff, you're applying it across the board to everything. If the connection comes from any of those countries, including there's an option to have an unknown country, right, which is like a catch-all bucket for unknown countries.
Yeah.
You're going to block access. I've seen it done the other way as well, which is allow from my allowed countries, so allow from Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, block only, and then obviously everything else is blocked. This is the way I like to do it. This kind of works for me, and works really well for the customers that I've worked on, to implement this. And it, like I said, it's just an additional thing. I'm surprised that not a lot of folks actually do this.
Mhm.
Obviously, in a lot of instances, this is something that you would do quite commonly, right? If you're thinking about on-premises infrastructure, firewalls, that type of stuff. Like, why would you allow connections to stuff that from locations that you wouldn't normally be expecting to see connections? There's so much cruft and nonsense on the internet these days. Now, obviously, the way that conditional access works, this isn't going to stop the traffic, right? It's just going to mean that you're putting an extra block in place of, if someone were to get hold of credentials or somehow exploit creds, they're not going to be able to actually log in to the environment, because it's not going to allow the connection. It's not like a firewall that will just drop packets that
No.
are coming from the Netherlands, right? And actually, Koos and I had this problem before, because when we collaborate on the episodes, we have a storage environment that we share our collaboration on, and I had set that up, and I dropped I was dropping traffic from everywhere except Australia, and so Coast couldn't get in, and we couldn't understand why. And it was, well, because Coast is connected from the Netherlands, and I wasn't allowing that traffic. That's not, you're not going to be dropping traffic here. It's just a way that even if you successfully authenticate, it's going to say, look, you can't get to this resource from where you are right now. So it's just that sort of slightly just added hindrance, right? If you will. So
Yeah. Unfortunately, I see this feature being used at companies for the wrong reasons, I think, because I see a lot of companies implement a specific allow policies from certain IP addresses, and then they use their own corporate office locations to exempt them, from example, from MFA, for example. And I think
yes,
that's really bad practice. So I wanted to bring that up as well here in this
no,
episode.
definitely, that's very good, and I think folks will be familiar with the known locations because of that, and I think
Yeah,
when we first started deploying MFA, 10 years ago, that's what we did.
yeah,
That's how it was, right? At that time, if you were on the corporate network, you were considered safe, and we didn't want to hinder you with the MFA.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we're long past that being accepted policy, right? So
yeah,
so yeah, I wouldn't be doing that either if I
yeah.
was anyone. So
And
um,
as you know, I work for a Microsoft partner. We provide an incident response service for customers, and we also require our customers to onboard an enterprise application, which we use to do some stuff in their tenant. And we like to implement this exact reason of this exact solution as well to only allow the application to be used from our known specific outbound IP address. So that
mm,
way, this customer is sure that the permissions they grant us via that application are only accessible from our specific outbound IP we use in Azure.
yeah, yeah,
So that gives them some kind of extra security. Unfortunately, I believe that this is an Entra-ID governance license, so not all of our customers have that. So it's called workload identities, I believe.
right,
So we
yep,
cannot always implement that, unfortunately. So it's a
yeah,
shame that Microsoft has split this into a separate license, but it only applies to applications, so not
yeah.
what you are referring to for
That's
users.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you're using, just for your user identities, and you just really just need
yeah,
conditional access, which P1, I'm pretty sure gives you just what you need for this. So that's included with E3, and then you can play around with essentially known locations within Entra, which is what this is. And
yeah,
yeah, hopefully some tips here to just kind of help you get started. If you wanted to do this, think about how you do it. Obviously think about legitimate travel and that type of stuff, and then how do you construct your list, right? Like I'm not sure I would go and like you said, I wouldn't go create a list with every single country except one. Like it, start somewhere where you've got a top
yeah,
10 list or something like that. Try and get rid of all the noise as much as you can. But yeah, hopefully this helps. I've included some links to the Microsoft Learn documentation as well, just in case. um, and that's that one. So
do you know, perhaps, Chris, if there is a way to create some kind of automation? And obviously, you can build stuff like this customized, but maybe it's a part of the Microsoft Entra ID suite as well, because I know there's a lot of automation features packed in there where you could say, let's say, we have that CEO which is going on some weird holiday to a very weird country somewhere which we haven't thought of, and that was on our block list, that we perhaps can detect his login from, I don't know, he's going to Nigeria for some reason, I don't know, and then we say, okay, Nigeria wasn't on our sanctioned list, and we send him an email like Meta and Google do with our personal accounts, and say, hey, were you logging in from Nigeria? Is this really you? And then when he clicks on yes, for example, you can add that to the list or allow him some way. Is that possible? Do you know that?
I'm sure that's possible. I'm not. I don't think that that's out of the box functionality. I
No,
don't
no,
think that
no.
that
Okay.
exists. Yeah, you could probably do that with Power Apps and a whole
Yeah,
bunch
yeah,
of other
yeah.
things, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's something that is part of sort of out of
No,
the
but
box
that will
functionality.
become a very elaborate custom solution where you also have to
Yeah,
dynamically update the conditional access policies from an app, and well, that will probably be a pain and not easy to implement. I was just wondering if it's there already.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, yeah. No, fair enough. So, Koos, tell us about the human factor. I'm excited to hear about this and
The
more
human
about
factor.
your time at DEF CON.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I keep going back to that. I had a great time there. I mentioned earlier. No, the human factor, or specifically the humans are usually the weakest link. This is a statement that is often thrown around casually, right? And the reason why I thought about this is indeed DEF CON. When I went to DEF CON last month, I went to the expo hall, and I visited the the Hack 5 booth. You were already familiar with them, Chris. I heard of them. I was aware of the Wi-Fi Pineapple, for example, but I wasn't aware of the plethora of pen testing equipment they sell. And I actually picked up an OMG cable there. And this is something I got interested in by listening to a Darknet Diaries episode a couple of weeks prior. It was kind of a coincidence. If people not familiar with Darknet Diaries, go give that a listen. It's a really great podcast by Jack Resider. And he had the inventor actually of the OMG cable in one of his episodes. And people who are watching on YouTube, I have the cable here. It just looks like exactly like a USB cable you find in an iPhone box by Apple. It's braided in exactly the same way. The connectors look the same way, but an OMG cable actually has some kind of a little bit a small computer, sort of speak, in one of the connectors, and it can ingest keystrokes. It has a Wi-Fi access point, so you can control it remotely. The cable it is, and you can run payloads on the device it is connected to. And I bought one because I was interested in what it could do, but I also wondered immediately, how can I protect end users from this? Because if this is just plugged into your computer, nobody will notice it's something weird going on. It just looks like a regular USB cable. And and I wasn't aware of this cable. Maybe it sounds a little bit silly, but I'm not a pen tester. I'm not a red teamer. I'm not really that into offensive security that much. So, and I was thinking, if I wasn't aware of this cable, how can I expect my colleagues from HR and marketing to know these kinds of attacks, that these kind of attacks even exist, right? So because this malicious cable acts like a keyboard, I'm also not sure how I could prevent this from being plugged in and becoming active. I could probably block all USB ports on all my endpoints, but that's obviously not feasible. So I thought, well, can I protect users from this? Well, perhaps, but not with tools, I think, but by training people. And that made me think about the human factor in this regard. And and I think the humans should not be considered the weakest link, and they might even, with proper training, can be a very valuable in your line of defense, actually.
Yeah, look, I
Um,
think so. I think this is like I said, earlier. This is a conversation I've had many times with colleagues of ours all over, and peers of ours all over the industry, right? Because I think there's very much different takes on this, right? Do you just accept that humans will always be the weakest link and try
mhm.
and build technical solutions and controls around that to prevent it? Or do you look at this and go, you know what, with proper education and training and stuff like that, we can kind of build that human firewall, and we can actually help bring these users on the journey with us. And when we have smarter end users, they're less likely to fall victim to all of this type of
Yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah, totally agree. And I want to dig a little bit deeper in what we can do to make the humans maybe a stronger line of defense along the road. But I want to give another example of also made me think about this. Was actually visiting the social engineering village at DEF CON as well. You visited, Chris. You also visited one of those phishing competitions, and that is actually an acronym of voice phishing. So people not aware, again, I was inspired to go there also by listening Darknet Diaries episodes in the past. People are put in a glass soundproof box on the stage, and they're doing phone calls with real companies, and they're trying to fish out all kinds of interesting information. So they are awarded points if they can find out what operating system people at the company are using, or what browser they're using, which version they're using, what kind of VPN software they're using. Are they using MFA, and what kind of MFA? Is it Okta? Is it Microsoft? Etc. Etc. So they are awarded a lot of points, and at the end of the weekend, the team with the most points wins some kind of prize. But I was actually surprised by two things. One thing, these guys and girls were calling actual companies, big companies we are all familiar with in the United States. And I was surprised on one end that almost anyone they got to speak had some kind of security awareness. awareness training. You could really tell that the people on the other side of the line wasn't giving out information from the get-go, and they were asking about a confirmation over email, or schedule a meeting separately to go over it, for example, because they all introduced themselves as, I don't know, somebody from the IT department or the cybersecurity department or whatever. But I was pleasantly surprised by that part. But on the other end, the social engineers were so smart, and they applied a lot of flair, and they insisted, and they for example, they used a little bit of leverage, like I'm not achieving my target here before the end of the month. I'm having issues with my boss. If you cannot, it's just a couple of simple questions. Please help me out. And then eventually they did get a lot of information out of those people. And again, it made me think the human factor is so important. And I can imagine, I'm not able to vouch for all of my colleagues at the company I work for, that they wouldn't fall for the same tactics as well. So that's why I thought, well, this might be an interesting topic for this month. Again, I think humans, when trained properly, would and could be able to detect those social engineering attempts when the tech can't, because obviously humans have some kind of instinct, intuition, and they're able to detect this. Humans can also report phishing links, for example, when they go through Defender for Office, for example. You mentioned earlier, Chris, no matter how secure and properly configure how you configure those security tools, some stuff still goes through, right? And then a human is able to detect, well, wait a minute, I didn't order a new kitchen out of Great Britain. Why am I receiving an invoice from that? Maybe I should not open this invoice. And fun fact, this actually happened with a company I worked in the past, and they opened the invoice, and it wasn't a PDF, of course. But again, properly trained humans and aware of the consequences are able to spot it when tech couldn't. And also with MFA, you see MFA fatigue attacks being more common as well. And when somebody in his free time receives repeatedly, time after time, MFA requests, instead of blinding accepting them, maybe they should report it to the IT department that their account might be compromised. And lastly, with the OMG cables, if I would go into a company and plug in a cable inside the receptionist computer, people might be able to say, hey, why is this random guy plugging in a cable in that PC under the desk, right? So that's why I think humans should not be discarded as a weak link when it comes to security.
So interesting question, scenario here is about 20 years ago, I had a customer who were trying to secure their endpoints and their fleet from USB things being plugged in, right?
Yeah.
And the solution they came up with was to glue the USB port shut.
Oh, that's great.
I'm not even joking. This was true. They
just super glue it in.
Super glue it in, man. They were gluing the port shut so that people could not put USB keys in there in the USB ports. So
wow,
20 years. Hey, we've come a long way. We don't have to glue anymore, right? We have Intune and
I
stuff
think
like
20
that.
years ago they were actually quite early to that game when it came to USB attacks. So can't blame them for that. But I'm not sure if super glue was really the most efficient solution there. Yeah. Yeah, so but there are maybe some ways to still do this in a correct way, and I'll want to touch on some technology tips later on as well. Yeah, so how do we make people aware of this, right? So I'm not sure if we can do this with simulated phishing campaigns alone. And it's funny, whenever I'm at a party and I talk with people there and they ask me what I do for a living, and I tell them I'm in cybersecurity. Most people come with some kind of anecdote of and make fun of their phishing campaigns they use at the office, because the phishing emails are so ridiculously obvious, and they just make fun of them, and they have to go through these elaborate video tutorials which are very boring, and they figured out that when they just open up the video and answer their email at the same time, it will complies as a completed training right at the end. So they're making fun of it, and I was like, well, that's not why your company is implementing this, but I think they might have they should have done a better job with serving this content to them, right? So I think you should use security awareness which really resonates. So maybe at least customize those phishing exercises and tailor them to your organization. I don't think enough companies take advantage of this. Also, perhaps use realistic scenarios and don't stick to those emails only. Maybe also drop some phishing USB drives on the parking lot and invite
Mm.
mystery guests to visit, and install maybe some rogue Raspberry Pi in that meeting room with all the exposed ports along the wall, right? So
Mm.
maybe see if people will notice that, and make them aware of the dangers of whenever that happens. And another thing that, and again, I'm relating back to DEF CON, public Wi-Fi. I also discussed this with my wife, and she cleaned up all the known public Wi-Fis afterwards as well. I'm really proud of her. So explain the risks of, and teach people of how to remove stored trusted Wi-Fi's on their devices.
Mm.
You're familiar with this, Chris, I assume. So
Yep.
the attack where a Wi-Fi pineapple or a rogue Wi-Fi device can actually detect probing of known networks by, for example, your iPhone, because it was once connected to a hotel Wi-Fi 5 years ago, and the rogue access point can just mimic that Wi-Fi, and then the device will automatically connect to that without any user interaction. And this obviously enables a lot of man-in-the-middle attacks. And you can actually go into, because I wasn't aware of this before I went to DEF CON, I wanted to clean up my known networks. I know how to do this on Windows and Mac, but I
Yeah.
thought I had to reset my Wi-Fi adapter on my phone and my tablet. But instead, iOS and also Android appears, and I put links in the show note. There are
Mm.
ways to pull up the entire list of
The
known
list, yeah, and
Wi-Fi
just remove
networks
them. Yeah.
and
Yep.
just remove them. So my advice would be, tip number one for today is go to that list and remove all the public Wi-Fi's which don't have any security on them, to make sure you're not a victim to these kinds of attacks. So yeah, and then lastly, technology can still help, obviously. So you mentioned the glued USB sticks. I'm not sure if I can really hand out that advice, but within Defender for Endpoint, for example, you have the ability to block or allow certain class IDs like vendor IDs and product IDs on USB devices. So if you have a host of endpoints and you know what kind of keyboards and mice are attached to them, well, you might as well just allow those and block anything else. That could be an example. Or if you need people to work with USB drives to exchange data for some reason, hand out company owned USB drives and register those as allowed and do not allow anything else, for example. That could be a way to work around a little bit of this issue. With the OMG cable, for example, I can just spoof a vendor ID and a hardware ID. So when I plug in my OMG cable in my Mac, it just thinks it's an Apple Magic Keyboard. Because of that, because you can just spoof it from known lists from the internet. But if you're not using Magic Keyboards in your company network, this cable will still be blocked, right?
Yeah.
Um, Also, maybe for MFA, we're talking about MFA quite a lot in the last couple of episodes, but I think people could benefit from configuring the additional context in the Authenticator app.
Mm.
So, when you get that pop up and you can actually enrich the information with a source IP address and a country, I think people would be less obliged to click on approve when they get a message that they're logging in from Pakistan, for example.
Mm.
Could be useful to enable that if you not
It's
have
really
already
important,
done
that
that.
actually. And if you follow things like the CIS benchmarks, those
Yeah,
are sort of required configurations for CIS, is the enrichment of the MFA prompt. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Microsoft also allows you to. I'm not sure if this is enabled by default in tenants. Maybe it is nowadays. Maybe it wasn't in the past. But you can enable report suspicious activities from MFA. So when you enable that, user can click on "This is not me" from the app, and it will actually report a potential malicious MFA request from that user, and you can follow up on those from your SOC, for example. Also, something to keep in mind. Um, Also, the report message button in Outlook. Maybe we should explain people what it does, enable it, make sure people use it,
Mm.
so that you can find out about those emails which could potentially be missed by Defender for Office, for example. And also in regards to those rogue devices in that one meeting room I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure how you think about this, Chris, but I see far too few companies incorporate port authentication on the switches.
Mm.
Would
Yeah,
you agree with
yeah,
that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's a lot of organizations, a lot of networks have become very simple again, right? Because we
Yeah.
don't have on-premises infrastructure, so they've
Yeah.
gotten rid of VLANs, they've gotten rid of NAC and any of these types of things, and all they really do is they provide access to the internet, right? And it's just an open thing. You plug in and you get access to the internet, and that's it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Well, if that is only what your company is nowadays, an internet
mm,
access point, well, that's fine. But if you're
mm,
allowing that IP address to exempt from conditional access policies,
it's a
you
problem,
might
right?
also incorporate some other security, right, on the network.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for people who do not know, port authentication, it's an 802.1x protocol. I have implemented this in the past at companies where a switch will do a radius authentication attempt, for example, with a certificate on your client device to find out if it authenticates properly. Until that, it stays in a separate VLAN in a separate IP subnet without any access to corporate resources, without any internet access. And once the authentication came through, then you're moved into a separate VLAN, and then you receive the proper IP address, and then you get access. And this obviously eliminates the fact that you can just plug in a Raspberry Pi in that meeting room, for example.
Mm,
And even without this, know that Defender for Endpoint also is able to snitch out, quote unquote, potentially rogue devices if the device discovery is turned on. Not sure if this is turned on by default. I saw some customers switching this off for some reason. I don't know why. But if you go into the Defender portal settings, endpoints discovery, there you can choose between standard or basic. I would always advise to select standard, because that way Defender for Endpoint devices you manage will actually ping the device they see on the same network to find out additional information about the device, and they will
mm,
show up in the discovered devices section under your device inventory. And there is also KQL query in the show notes where you find out which discovered devices there are, so the SOC can follow up on those and detect if those are really, well, perhaps just servers not being onboarded yet or an endpoint not being onboarded yet, could be fine. But here, that Raspberry Pi should also pop up connected in that meeting room. So I think this is really valuable stuff to enable, and also keep an eye out on those discovered devices.
Yeah, it's always good to the more insight you can get on things on your network, right? I think your traditional networks are sort of a thing of the past these days, but there are still, organizations return to office. All these things are a real
Yeah,
thing. You're going into a premises. There's going to be a switch or switches and stuff like that, right? And yeah, so helpful to think of networks as a collection of devices again, and not just everyone's separate home connection where they're coming in from. So
yeah. So I put a whole list of links actually in the show notes. A lot of topics I touched on: darknet diaries, OMG cables, Hack 5, how to remove stored Wi-Fi, all kinds of stuff. So please look at the show notes if you want to know more of each of them. And yeah, this was my topic for this week. I think it's an underrated topic, and with some proper training. And like you mentioned earlier, Chris, I think we sometimes incorporate security measures like blocking certain stuff without actually informing our end users why we're doing this.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
also might give more frustration to the users because they don't understand, and they feel limited, and they might move to different ways of achieving the same goal, because they don't understand why we have blocked or prevented that from happening.
Yeah, I think the user journey is very important. That whole sort of change management aspect of everything we do, and I don't think our users are dummies, right? I think we live in a world now where folks are using passkeys and password managers and all these things in their personal lives,
Yeah.
and so they are smarter about all of these types of concepts now than ever before, right? I don't know about what it's like in Europe, but here in Australia, we've had so many high profile data leaks and things that all of our banks and all of these things, they're all putting a lot of effort into user education now to sort of help users be smarter about scams and stuff like that. And I think the result of that is that we end up with a population of folks that are just generally, more aware of these things.
Yeah.
And so I think that we can use that, right? It's good for us as security professionals to be able to take that knowledge and help educate them, because ultimately security is everyone's responsibility, and it kind of
Yeah.
helps us better defend our important digital assets. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very nice.
True. So for this month's community project, I wanted to put some spotlight on two German MVPs, which are also both colleagues. They both work for Gluckanya in Germany. I'm talking about Thomas Naunheim and Fabian Bader. You probably know their names, Chris, from the community.
I do.
And apparently, I wasn't aware of Thomas's project initially, but I saw he and Fabian worked on Sentinel enrichment, which is a tool which makes it very easy from PowerShell to update Microsoft Sentinel watch lists. And everybody who worked with watch lists and SIEM as code solutions, like we do at the company, knows that updating watch lists can be quite a pain, especially when you want to update certain entries in the watch list. We go about and just remove the entire watch list and redeploy it again, for example. And that's not always very optimal. So Sentinel enrichment, you should really take a look at a PowerShell module. And actually, Thomas incorporated this into his Entra Ops project. And this made me look into Entra Ops. And that is a research project by Thomas to show capabilities for automated management of Entra ID tenant by a DevOps approach. So things that he does is like track changes and history of privileged principals, for example, and their assignments as code. So you can incorporate this
Wow.
as a DevOps agent or a GitHub action, for example, to periodically scan against your Entra ID tenant and identify assets and changes and build reports on that on privileged accounts, for example. A lot of stuff. So I think you
Mm.
should definitely look for the Entra Ops at GitHub and download the Sentinel enrichment from the PowerShell gallery if you like. And obviously the links are in show notes.
Very nice. These guys are both very, very active in the
Yes.
community with their various GitHub projects, and they do a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. I think both of them are actually also involved with the Meister project. I think the thing
Yes,
that
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
so
Yeah.
they do a lot of work on creating things for the community. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely worth checking it out
Yeah.
and giving them a follow. So
Yeah,
very,
I
very
met
nice.
them both a couple of times because obviously we're neighbors, right? They're from Germany, and
Yeah.
Thomas spoke at Yellowhead as well earlier this year,
Hmm.
and me and Fabian are also organizing Yellowhead. By the
Mm.
way, spoiler alert: we're already started organizing Yellowhead for next year, which will take place in January. But more on that later. Yeah, so
Ah, very nice.
two
Yeah.
great guys. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, just when you say neighbors, you mean that's where you go to buy your beer on the weekends, right? When you get bored on Saturday, you take a quick trip to
Oh my
Germany to go
God,
buy some
the
beer.
Dutch are known for being very frugal. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. And there is a lot of news items lately of people escaping the high prices in the Netherlands by going by car for hours, driving to Germany to buy cigarettes and beer and whiskey and whatnot, and then drive back home. Yeah, it's really
It's
a
so
thing.
funny because you actually have such amazing beer in the Netherlands anyway. So I don't know why you would go to Germany for that,
Well, the
but okay.
Germans wouldn't agree, I think. Also, the Belgians wouldn't agree as
Right,
well, I think. But
right.
well,
Yeah. Experts Live US. We'll
yes.
wrap up, I guess, the show just talking to another sort of shout out for that. So October 10th is the date. Koos and I will both be in New York City at Times Square at Experts Live US. Um, Massive conference, more than 30 or 35 speakers, four or five
Amazing lineup.
tracks. It is. I mean, I'm excited. I don't know how I'm going to fit all of it in because I'm also delivering a session, and as a UCOS, so that's going to be fun to be able to just do some speaking in real life speaking. Is
Yeah,
going to be nice.
yeah.
I'm sure there'll be Tim Tams and Stroopwafels as well for our audience.
Thanks for the
Not to put you
reminder.
on the spot, but it's going to be a really fun day. I really think that if you're in the US, anywhere in the US, folks, really have a look at this and consider this one. October 10th, I said $15 for a ticket. And the all of the proceeds for this are going to support STEM kids, New York City. So I think um, a group or very very near and dear to the hearts of everyone, I guess, in the tech industry, especially folks with young kids or for kids getting into technology and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So nice to be able to do a good thing with this as well. So
Yeah, yeah, and $15 is a steal, right? And you're supporting a good cause at the same time. So there are still tickets available. So yeah, make sure to be there.
yeah, expertslive.us is the website. Come on down and see myself, Koos, and just all of the other great speakers. It'll be really really cool to catch up and see everyone. And like I said, all the proceeds go to a really really good cause. So we're really excited to be involved.
Yeah. Well,
All
I think
right,
we're going to wrap up the episode, Chris.
time
Number
to wrap up.
11. I'm looking
Number
forward to
11.
the 12th and last one of this season, live from New York City.
Yep, that's going to be good. Going to be great to be able to record in person again. Pretty cool to be able to do two in a year. Be able to do
Yeah.
two in person, right? Seattle
Yeah.
and New York City. So that's going to be really fun. Yeah, folks. As always, like, subscribe. We really are. I think we're starting to sort of really think about how we can sort of promote this. The podcast a little bit more, and we haven't really done any promotion so much since we started. It's really just our own circles and our own networks of people that kind of talk about it and stuff. So please give us a like and a follow and a subscribe, and share it with some of your friends if you think it's useful. We love doing this. It's really a very exciting time for both of us when we get to record. And but we also want to make sure that we're putting our effort where our effort is best. So if you like it, if there's something that you'd like to see us talk about, or please reach out to us on the
Yeah.
socials. We're on LinkedIn, and we're pretty much everywhere. LinkedIn's probably the best place, but
Yeah.
really catch us anywhere. And let us know what's important to you, and we'll see what we can do to build a show around that. Otherwise, please help us promote the work we're doing here. And yeah, as always, thanks again for spending time with us. Koos, great to see you. I can't wait to see you in a few weeks, and look forward to that in-person episode coming up. It'll be for November of
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's
um,
true. Looking forward to that one. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a nice day.
bye bye.